We turn now to Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. Senator, welcome back. Let's start with the Trump cabinet or possible Trump cabinet picks. You've said that you would block maybe Rudy Giuliani or John Bolton if they were put forward for positions in the Trump administration. Why?
You know, I supported Donald Trump, and one of the reasons I did was that I liked what he had to say about the Iraq War was a mistake. I think that's an important historical lesson. It's not a matter of when he said it or who he said it to. It's a matter of he understands that the Iraq War was a mistake and regime change was a mistake. So I think it would be inconsistent with his campaign theme. I want people that run the State Department who agree with Donald Trump, and so I'm trying to help. I'm trying to be helpful here. And the problem with both Bolton and Giuliani is they're unrepentant in their support for the Iraq War. They haven't learned any of the lessons. And if we don't learn the lesson of the Iraq War, we're liable to commit it again. This is something Hillary Clinton never understood. You know, she said she voted for the Iraq War, but then she thought she was wrong, but then she did the same thing in Libya, the same thing in Syria. And I think regime change in the Middle East hasn't worked. And so I think it's important that we get someone head of the State Department that understands what Donald Trump said over and over again. The Iraq War was a mistake.
Would you include Mitt Romney, who Vice President-elect Mike Pence said is under consideration in that same basket?
I'm not sure I would call him unrepentant. I would say that he is somebody who has supported the Iraq War, and I would want to hear more. I think we should ask, no matter what the stature of the person, we should ask, what are your beliefs? Was the Iraq War a mistake? Are you for regime change? Do you think that toppling Assad in Syria will lead to a better world or a safer world? Do you think toppling, Gaddafi in Libya did? Do you think toppling Mubarak? All of these questions should be asked, and they're important questions, and I will ask that. As far as reasonability, if I were to rank Romney up there with someone who I think is a reasonable, even keel versus a Giuliani or a Bolton, I think Giuliani and Bolton are out there on the extreme. I don't think they're very diplomatic, and I think you want the chief diplomat to be diplomatic. And I've said before, Bolton might be better as a Secretary of War, but he's certainly not a diplomat or someone who acts in a diplomatic way or thinks that diplomacy might be an alternative to war.
Do you have any of your own candidates you'd put forward?
You know, I'm afraid I don't get to pick. I wish I got to pick. But, you know, they've said in the mix, Bob Corker was in the mix, and I also find him to be very reasonable, very knowledgeable with foreign affairs. As head of the Foreign Relations Committee, I think he's interacted with many of our foreign leaders. And I think that's what you want, is a reasonable, calming hand at the State Department. You don't want someone throwing bombs or advocating regime change. I mean, both Bolton and Giuliani have advocated for regime change in Iran, and that doesn't sound like diplomacy. That sounds like war.
Right. Have you been contacted by anybody in the Trump orbit to say, to at least address your concerns? Or?
Well, we have. We've had conversations with them, nothing public or nothing I care to make public, but we've had conversations expressing, you know, it's a very close vote. I mean, there's 52 Republicans. Some of the people that have been put forward, I think, are not guaranteed to get any Democrat support. So they lose my support and a couple of other Republicans. Many Republicans have come up to me and said, you know what? Bolton is kind of a bomb thrower. He's not really sort of this even keel with a worldview that we want over there. We want someone a little more rational or reasonable. And so I think that there are several potential Republican votes against someone like a Bolton, possibly Giuliani. The other thing Giuliani's going to stir up is it's going to be a hornet's nest on all the financial stuff.
What did you make of Vice President-elect Pence's remarks about waterboarding and torture? It seems like that's now open for discussion again.
Well, you know, the Bush administration said we weren't going to do it. The Obama administration said we weren't going to do it. The international community condemns it. I think it is torture. And, well, John McCain and I don't always agree on everything. We have our disagreements a few times. But on this, I absolutely think John McCain's right. We shouldn't torture. And instead of sort of holding this to ourselves and saying, you know, being ambiguous about it, we should telegraph to the world that we're better than this and we don't torture. And this is why we are exceptional as a people. We don't torture any prisoners.
You've also been a vocal critic of what the government does to look into its citizens' business, whether it's bulk collection of data or wiretapping. What, given that mindset, is your view about the elevation of Jeff Sessions to Attorney General and Mike Pompeo into the CIA?
You know, I'm a fierce advocate of privacy and think that you do have a right to privacy and that your records, whether they're in the possession of the phone company or not, that you still retain a right of privacy in those records. We all sign privacy agreements every time we do a computer search with a computer search company or with a telephone company. So I think we do have a right to privacy. I'm hopeful, but I also know that this president doesn't necessarily agree with me on the next president. And so we'll see. I'll continue to be an equal opportunity defender of the Bill of Rights, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat president.
But do you have any specific concerns with respect to Sessions or Pompeo? They both supported the Patriot Act, bulk collection of metadata.
Right. It does concern me, yes. But I would say that with Pompeo, he's going to have to also answer, to my liking, whether or not he's still for torture, whether or not he's for waterboarding. That's important. He's also been for expanding NSA powers. Many of the NSA powers were done, I think, in secret without the knowledge of most members of Congress. Even some members who were authors or co-authors of the Patriot Act said, we never intended for them to collect all that data in Utah, and they didn't tell us. So one of my questions for Pompeo will be, are there secret programs that even Congress doesn't know about? And I think there still are programs ongoing that the bulk of Congress is not aware of.
Let me ask you, what do you think the Senate's oversight role is with respect to Donald Trump and then the Trump businesses?
You know, I think that he probably will have every legal right to not put things in a blind trust, but it may continue to come up if there is an appearance that a certain country has a Trump hotel and that there's more visits to that particular country or Trump hotel. Will that be a problem? Yeah, I think he'll get dogged about it. So probably it's legal for him not to completely separate. But my advice, if I were asked, would be try to do the best you can to separate so you don't have this. It'll deter you from things you want to get done if everybody keeps asking you about, what about the Trump hotel you visited?
It does seem to me we just had a big campaign in which the fuzzy line between the Clinton Foundation and Hillary Clinton's State Department was a crucial sign of her weakness as a president. So why would a president wanting to drain the swamp come in and not have the lines be bright and clear for all to see?
This will be the same problem with Giuliani and his international interest in financial, dealings around the world. So yeah, I think it's best to clean this out. And if you just spent a year and a half criticizing Clinton for taking money from foreign countries, you better be very careful about appointing somebody who's taken a lot of money from foreign countries as well.
Donald Trump talked about a Ford plant in Kentucky this week. Did he do anything to help keep that Ford plant in Kentucky?
Maybe. And I think that people misconstrue this. They say, oh, the jobs were never leaving. Well, assembly line was leaving, so maybe the potential of jobs was leaving. Something was going. And I think there is some value to the bully pulpit. People say, well, how's he going to do this? Well, you know what? Maybe talking a tough line on trade and that, there will be repercussions if you leave the country. Maybe it did change their mind. I don't know, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and give them a little credit for it, simply because it's my state and we're happy that an assembly, of a certain vehicle is not going to Mexico. Whether the jobs were going or not, I think something was going to Mexico and now it's not. Sounds good to me.